Welcome to episode 51 of the Sean Lowery Show. I've made it through 50 episodes. 50 episodes in 50 weeks. It's basically been 1 year since I started the podcast. And I knew from the very beginning that how hard it is to start a podcast, how hard it is to get an audience, find an audience, build something up. And the promise that I made to myself is that I'm going to do 100 episodes in 100 weeks. No excuses. Nothing can stop me from doing it. And no matter what happens, I'm not allowing myself to reevaluate anything until I get to 100 episodes. So you got another year of me at the very least for the Sean Lowery Show. But I got to say, I'm proud of my first 50 episodes, really. I haven't blown up or anything, but on YouTube, I've had 50 episodes. And if you add up the views from all my episodes, I've had 50,000 views. So that's not bad at all. I'm happy about that. And, honestly, I'm proud of every single one of those views. And I plan on making something out of this podcast. And I know it takes time. It takes sticking around. It takes learning and seeing how you want to do things. And I'm 50 episodes in, right in the middle, right in the thick of it. So I've been having fun with it. So the one lesson is that, committing to something, setting a date, it can be powerful. I've wanted to quit at times naturally. And, some weeks I'm less excited or less inspired than I am for other weeks. But it's literally, I haven't given my choice. It's literally not an option. And I think that's powerful. And in my last episode, episode 50, with Patrick Bet David, I can't believe I had this guy on. He's one of the kings of entrepreneurship. He's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And he's built up an insurance company. He has a Valuetainment, his YouTube channel. And if you would have asked me who's one of the best guests you can ever get on your podcast in the world of entrepreneurship, it would be him. So it was so cool to see that I had Patrick Bet David on. I've been listening to him for years. And it was kind of unreal experience to hear his voice so many times on YouTube and on the internet, and then actually talk to him and hear my voice with his voice in real life. So I listened back to it a few times, and it was just so cool. But it was a great way to cap off my 50th episode. And like I said, I'm committed to doing 100 episodes. So that's the lesson. Commit to something, set a deadline, fight through obstacles and negative feelings, and love yourself no matter what. So that is the lesson. And with that being said, there's not going to be any more lessons here in episode 51 because I'm cracking a beer. And I've been doing this other thing, Drink and Grow Rich, which I go live on Instagram on Fridays. And this is basically going to be kind of a Drink and Grow Rich style podcast. So cheers, everyone. But I'm basically just going to recap and do a little award show style to recap the first 50 episodes, the first year, basically, of the Sean Lowery Show. And I'm going to do it like award show style. So I'm going to talk about the best episode, worst episode, best guest, worst guest, best moment, worst moment. And if you win one of these awards, your career is basically set. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is best and worst episode. So for the best episode in the first 50 episodes of the Sean Lowery Show, the winner goes to episode 37. Episode 37 was with John VALLIS, and we talked about Bitcoin. And over the course of the podcast, I've talked mostly about entrepreneurship, but some of the things that I'm interested in are electric cars, Bitcoin, all these different topics, 3D printing, and I've tried to bring on experts to talk about those things. But yeah, episode 37 with John VALLIS is the best episode, and honestly, it wasn't my best performance because I've had to get used to interviewing people. It's a different style, and I don't think that I did such a great job on that episode, but he is such a wealth of knowledge about Bitcoin, and he did such a great job. And it has my most views on YouTube. It has 14,000 views, which is my most viewed episode, so that's why it's the best episode. And he was just great to talk to. He was so knowledgeable about Bitcoin in general, and he had a really cool background. And it's just by far, I think, the best episode, and the views show it. So, John VALLIS, congratulations. You are the winner of the best episode of the Sean Lowery Show for now. All right, so the next award is the worst episode. Not every award show talks about the worst, but this award show, that's what we're doing. So the worst episode, the winner is Episode 43, which was the 48 Laws of Power. Now, this was me doing a solo podcast. And one thing that's been interesting over my first 50 episodes is kind of deciding what's better, doing a guest, doing it by yourself. And I've gone back and forth, and I've done many different styles. I've done some short motivational ones. I've done some ones where it's just me talking, kind of like this one, and I've had the guests. And for some reason, this one, The 48 Laws of Power, is such a fascinating book. And I've been doing a lot of content about it, thinking about it. But for some reason, this episode, I don't know. I just didn't bring the heat. It was my least favorite episode. Although, I think my voice sounded good in it. It was just something. But, all right, so that is the best episode and the worst episode of the Sean Lowery Show. Okay, the next category. The next category is the best guest and the worst guest. So one thing that's interesting when you're just starting a podcast, right? And you're not known, you're not famous, like me, not yet. Why do people even want to come on your podcast? You know, you definitely need to build up the guests that you have on so that when you try to get more guests in the future, they look at your podcast and they're like, oh, he's had some good guests on. I'll be happy to go on this. But when you start from scratch and you get guests, it's a little bit harder. And one thing that's been interesting about getting guests is like what their motivation is for even wanting to come on my podcast. Obviously, the main reason people want to go on podcasts is to get a lot of views and be in front of a huge audience. And, you know, you don't have that when you're first starting. So a lot of the people that I've had on the podcast, a lot of them like had a motive as far as like maybe they wanted to sell a course or just kind of use me a little bit. Or I'm always like, why would you even want to come on? So that's been an interesting part of having guests in general. But I'm so excited for the next 50 episodes to continue to get good guests. But with that being said, the award for the best guest, this is easy. It goes to episode 50, Patrick Bet-David. I already talked about it, but it's so cool. It was just so cool to have him on. And he's obviously the best guest. And another really cool guest that I had was actually Mike Hart. And this was early on. This was one of my first like big interviews. And it was really cool because I like the guy, and he was also on Joe Rogan's too. So one of the things we talked about in that episode was the behind the scenes of going on Joe Rogan. And the main thing that I learned from it was that Joe Rogan paid for his trip. He bought his flight and he put him up in LA. So I didn't really know that. I always wondered when people go on the biggest podcast in the world, what's the logistics? Do they pay for their own flight and stuff? So I learned from him that Joe will actually pay you to come out. And I like to do that someday too. So that was cool to learn from him. He was a cool guest. And yeah, I've had some good guests. Definitely my hottest guest was Daria, and she's this Russian girl who had a great conversation about mindset. She's hot. I'm not gonna lie, she's hot. So that is the winner of the best guest, Patrick Bet-David. Mike Hart's the runner-up. Daria's the hottest. All right, so the worst guest. Now, if the best guest can make your career the worst guest, this is bad news. You're getting the worst guest on the Sean Lowery Show. But the award for the worst guest in the first 50 episodes of the Sean Lowery Show goes to Brady HESTER of Brad Dog Media. Now, I don't know if he's going to see this. I love this guy. And when I first started podcasting, he was one of the first guys I connected with. I went on his show. He was putting out all this content, starting a podcast. And the dude fell off the face of the earth. Brady, Brad Dog Media, if you're listening, what happened, man? You fell off the face of the earth. But when he came on the podcast, we actually had a really cool conversation. But my main thing that I remember from that podcast is we guessed and predicted what the plot of Space Jam 2 was going to be. And I'm still very curious to see what that plot is. So I'm hoping that I guessed the right plot, and we'll go back to that podcast and clip out when I predicted the plot of Space Jam 2. But that was the worst guess because he fell off the face of the earth. And I'm not going to fall off the face of the earth. And that's one of the keys. One of the keys to being successful is sticking with it, keeping doing it. And I was very disappointed to see Brad Dog Media start around the same time as I was starting and fall off. So that's why he's the worst guest. And another person that is interesting in this category is, besides for Patrick Bet-David, one of my most known guests is this guy, Travis Chappell. And he has a successful podcast about a business and entrepreneurship. It was like ranked in the YouTube. It was ranked in the iTunes top 25 entrepreneurship podcast at some point. So it's really cool. And he actually had some recognition, and I was excited to talk to him. It wasn't my favorite episode, but after the podcast, he DM'd me and then he said to text him, and we started texting. And he said to me he wants to help me with my podcast. And I was like, all right. And then I was like, what's going on? How are you going to help me? And he sent me a text that said, if I pay him $2,400, he will help rank my podcast and put some articles out so it gets more SEO. And I said, oh, all right, let me know. Send me some more info. And he goes, that's it. That's all the information, because I've never done this with anyone before. And hey, if it doesn't work out and it goes really bad, I'll refund you 50% of your money. And I was like, what? Like, you're going to just do this random plan with me, charge me $2,400, and then if it doesn't work out, give me half my money back? It just seemed like weird and shady. And yeah, he's in the conversation of the worst guest just because of that. It was weird. I thought it was kind of weird. And it's a lot of people, they come on. And one of the questions that I liked that I asked him was, why do you want to come on my podcast? And he said something along the lines of, when I was first starting, I was able to go on some podcasts and people helped me out. And I liked that answer because it was true. But it kind of seemed like he was just doing that to get me to do this like weird course thing. And I don't know. It was interesting, but Travis Chappell is in the conversation, but the worst guest, Brad Dog Media. Sorry, guys. I'm roasting you. This is the behind the scenes. You're getting it from me. And it's actually always interesting, like what you talk about behind the scenes with a guest, because I'm curious, like, do people pay to go on each other's podcasts? I'm learning about the whole world of this. And, maybe in the next 50 episodes, I'll start talking a little bit more about the behind the scenes stuff, because I'm a transparent guy. I'm a real guy. But that is the best and the worst guest from the first 50 episodes of the Sean Lowery Show. I wonder who my all-time best guest would be. I mean, if we're going to reach for the stars, I would be like, I don't know, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, President of the United States, like someone who would be the Pope. So what if I got the Pope on the podcast? That would be interesting. All right. The last category of awards is the best and the worst moment in the first 50 episodes of the Sean Lowery Show. So we'll start with the best moment. And the best moment of the Sean Lowery Show in year one, the award goes to me getting a compliment from a guy worth $100 million, Patrick Bet David. Like, I was nervous to talk to him. And the way that I got him on, as far as I'm talking about behind the scenes a little bit, was I reached out to his website and I filled out the form to get Patrick on the podcast. I actually got a response back from his team. And they said, if you buy Patrick's course, well, he'll consider coming on your show. And I was like, damn, all right. It was a risk I was willing to take. And I bought the course. And I started actually going through the course, but it didn't really apply to me. And I did not follow through on the course. It was basically just putting up money to get him. And they didn't even guarantee that he would come on. So I think they probably looked at my podcast and they said, are we even going to put this guy on here? And he did it. And it was so cool to get him on. And that's how I did it. But the best moment was actually talking to him. We had a good conversation, man. It was a great podcast. And he was asking me about my sales, asking me about my business. And he ended up complimenting me. He's like, look at the fire you got, man. You got to do this and that. You got to go to these courses for CEOs. And I was like, courses for CEOs? What's that? And he gave me the specific details. He's like, no, you need to go to the big boys. You need to be around a table with people where you are the least successful and smallest person. So it was cool that we started talking and he complimented me. So selfishly, that was the best moment for me, was to get a compliment from somebody who's worth hundreds of million dollars, who I look up to. So that is the best moment of the Sean Lowery Show. And I've had a lot of good moments. You got to go back and listen to all 50 episodes. And one day when I'm a big, famous motherfucker, it's going to be so cool to have all these documented. That's the coolest thing about podcasting, man. These things live forever. And you can always go back and see what you said before, see the way you were thinking. Even with that episode with Mike Hart, We were talking about the coronavirus, but it was very early on. It was before everything got shut down. So it's just funny how points in time with different things that you're thinking about in your head, that's the beauty of having all this stuff recorded. So that was the best moment. All right, so the worst moment of the Sean Lowery Show, the award goes to episode 37 with Ryan Langdon. So the reason why it was the worst moment was, if you haven't noticed, throughout the first 50 episodes, I've switched my set a lot. At first, it was at my house. I did an episode at my desk. I set up this room at my office. That's the podcasting room now. And it was our first episode with a blue curtain in the new room. And one thing I noticed about the new room, no air conditioning. So I started the podcast about 5-10 minutes in, dripping sweat. I was so sweaty. If you go back and look at episode 30 with Ryan Langdon, who went viral and got millions of views on his conversation about internal monologue, it was actually a pretty good podcast. I was so sweaty. And on top of that, I had just come back from my bachelor party where I was wrestling with my boys, and I had a black eye. So I was just sitting there. This is what happens when you have a new set. So on my first set, I was sweaty. Didn't know it was going to be so sweaty in the room. Now we have a little AC. This is now my first podcast with this kind of new backdrop, with this, this clutter, this cool stuff back here, which is going to be part of the podcast. And clearly, we got some kinks to work out for the next 50 episodes. But hey, it's cool to see how it is coming along. So, yeah, Brandon, we need to maybe get a better way to have the pictures hang. That's the beauty of it. This might actually, speaking of worst episode, maybe this will be it. But no, it's cool to recap, and I'm excited about the next 50 with this new set. And that's funny that just fell during the podcast, whatever. But worst moment goes, you know what? Worst moment goes to episode 51, where glass shattered from a falling design picture from behind me. So congratulations. You just beat episode 30, where I was sweaty with a black eye. Broken glass falling behind me is now the award winner. So congratulations. Oh, man. This is fun stuff. But so, yeah, I'm 50 episodes in. And one of the things that I'm going to try to do over the next 50 episodes is just continue to be myself. And it's been a debate, and me and Brandon always talk about it. I've always been thinking about it. It's that when you start a podcast, you need to find a very specific niche, and that's the advice that you get. And naturally, I'm an entrepreneur, and I love talking about business. I spend 90% of my time running my company, 5% of my time sleeping, and then only about 5-10% of my time doing this podcasting and stuff. I love doing it. It's been so much fun. But, I've done some episodes about 5 tips on how to hire people. And that was actually one of my Dark Horse favorite episodes because it was really value driven. And I would have loved to have that information when I was first starting. And I've done a few motivational, one I did about 5 ways to start an e-commerce business. I've done some of that stuff. But you know what? I just like talking to cool guests, bringing on cool people, and just having conversations, kind of Joe Rogan style a little bit. And over the next 50 episodes, I'm basically going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm just going to be myself. I don't give a fuck. I'm just going to be myself and talk to cool people, continue working on my interview skills and being a good talker and having interesting conversations. And that's what I'm going to do over the next 50 episodes. And one of the other things that I'm going to try to do is have repeat guests on, people that I've already talked to before and enjoyed podcasting with them. I'm going to try to have them on again, because if you have never talked with somebody before and you sit down and you start podcasting with them, it does take 15-20 minutes to kind of get to know each other, break the ice a little bit. So I feel like it's powerful if you continue to have people that you like on and have a good rapport with over and over. So that's going to be one of my plans. I want to have on Mike Hart again, Julian Rosen, episode 20. This guy's a mindset guy and a really cool dude. We had some fun conversations. I think on episode 20, I'm going to have him back on. Alex Guberman, definitely one of my favorite podcasts. He's an electric car expert, and we came on and talked about Tesla. And this dude was funny. Me and him have continued to kind of have a relationship after it, so I want to have him back on the podcast. And I want to continue to kind of build rapport with people and have some repeat guests, but also search for cool and interesting guests to come on. So I'm going to keep being myself. I'm going to keep fighting to have guests, and we're going to have some fun with it. So this is the halfway point. I'm just kind of fucking around a little bit on this episode, doing the award show, drinking beers. It's 4th of July weekend. But for the next 50 episodes of the Sean Lowery Show, I'm going to fucking bring it. We're going to have amazing guests. We got this new set rocking. We obviously got some kinks to work out, but we have made so much progress from being in my room at my house into a crappy microphone. I learned that I don't like my voice that much, which has led to some interesting things about microphones and can you change your voice? I've looked into talking to voice coaches. I've made so much progress from the very beginning. And to get Patrick Bet David at episode 50 from being in my bedroom at my house at episode 1, it's so cool to see the progress over the past year, and I cannot wait to see where my progress goes over the next year. And when I get to episode 100, that's when I told myself I'm going to reevaluate, see where I'm at, and if everything's going as great as I expect it to go, many more episodes to go. It took Joe Rogan over 1,000 episodes, I think maybe even closer to 1,500, before he got his big deal and was recognized on Spotify. It takes time. It takes time. It takes working out kinks, but that is the beauty and the fun of it. So this episode, we're having fun. We did the award show. Best guest, worst guest, best moment, worst moment. Talk some shit from behind the scenes, but if you guys are listening, I fucking love you guys. And I promise that I'm going to work my ass off to keep making this one of the best podcasts out there. And the only way to go is up, baby. So, all right, thanks for listening. Peace out, and I love you.